Picture this: gleaming skyscrapers piercing the clouds, sprawling residential complexes promising a life of luxury. This was the China that Evergrande, a real estate giant, helped build. But like a house of cards built on a shaky foundation, it was all destined to crumble. From its humble beginnings in 1996, Evergrande rapidly climbed the ranks of China's real estate ladder. But this rapid rise, as we'll soon discover, was fueled by a toxic cocktail of debt, political maneuvering, and a blatant disregard for quality. Evergrande's rise to prominence was nothing short of meteoric. In a market teeming with competitors, the company managed to outmaneuver and outspend its rivals, gobbling up land and launching projects at a breakneck pace. Local governments, eager to maintain the image of a thriving economy, turned a blind eye to the company's increasingly risky practices. But beneath the glossy facade lay a darker truth. Evergrande's business model was built on a foundation of debt. As Evergrande's empire expanded, whispers of doubt began to circulate. Rumors spread about the company's shoddy construction practices, its opaque financial dealings, and its questionable ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Despite these warning signs, many remained convinced of Evergrande's invincibility. Evergrande's strategy for dominating the Chinese real estate market was as simple as it was audacious: spend, spend, spend. Fueling this spending spree was a mountain of debt. Evergrande took on loans with an almost insatiable appetite, leveraging itself to the hilt. This high-risk strategy was like playing financial Jenga on a skyscraper's edge, exhilarating while it lasted, but with potentially catastrophic consequences. Central to Evergrande's strategy was its insatiable appetite for land. The company went on a buying spree, acquiring vast tracts of land across China. These land acquisitions were often fraught with controversy. Accusations of corruption, bribery, and forced evictions followed Evergrande like a shadow. But this relentless pursuit of expansion came at a cost that would soon become painfully clear. With land secured, Evergrande set about constructing its vision of the Chinese dream. Apartment complexes rose at an astonishing pace, each one seemingly taller and more opulent than the last. But behind the shimmering facade, there were cracks in the foundation. Stories began to emerge of shoddy workmanship, substandard materials, and incomplete projects. Evergrande was a master of marketing, skillfully crafting a narrative that resonated with millions of Chinese citizens. They weren't just selling apartments, they were selling a piece of the Chinese dream. Their marketing campaigns were ubiquitous, plastered across billboards, television screens, and internet banners. For a time, it seemed like everyone was buying into the Evergrande dream. In the world of Chinese business, it's lonely at the top if you're not friendly with the folks in charge. Evergrande cultivated a close relationship with the Chinese Communist Party, a bond that proved mutually beneficial. Evergrande showered the party with donations, and in return, the CCP looked the other way as Evergrande bent the rules. This cozy relationship afforded Evergrande a level of protection and access that its competitors could only dream of. Evergrande's dance with the CCP went beyond simple donations and backroom deals. High-ranking party officials, retired bureaucrats, and even family members of influential figures found themselves welcomed into the Evergrande family. This revolving door of influence blurred the lines between business and politics. Evergrande's ascent was fueled by a potent mix of ambition, debt, and political maneuvering. Their connections within the CCP greased the wheels of their expansion, allowing them to secure land permits and financing at a pace that left competitors bewildered. But this rapid growth, built on a foundation of political favors and financial engineering, was inherently unsustainable. For years, Evergrande's close relationship with the CCP seemed like an impenetrable shield, but as the company's financial woes mounted, those once valuable political ties began to feel more like shackles. The government, once a silent partner in Evergrande's success, now found itself in the unenviable position of having to clean up the company's mess. Evergrande's entire business model relied on a rather simple, yet incredibly risky principle: spend someone else's money before they realize it's gone. They perfected the art of operating on other people's dime, treating borrowed funds like their own personal piggy bank. This cash flow conundrum worked wonders as long as property prices continued their relentless ascent. but like a game of musical chairs, when the music stopped, Evergrande was left holding a mountain of debt and a whole lot of unfinished projects. Evergrande built apartments with the same breakneck speed and reckless abandon as a teenager playing a city-building simulator. They were obsessed with scale, with plastering their name across the Chinese skyline, regardless of the cost, or in this case, the quality. Corners were cut, materials were substituted, and safety standards were, well, let's just say, flexible. Stories began to surface of leaky pipes, cracked walls, and shoddy workmanship. Evergrande, like a dog chasing squirrels in a park, couldn't resist the allure of shiny new ventures. They dabbled in everything from electric vehicles to theme parks, from healthcare to, wait for it, toilet paper production. This lack of focus ultimately diluted their brand and stretched their resources dangerously thin. Now it wasn't like there weren't warning signs. Analysts, journalists, and even some brave souls within the Chinese government tried to sound the alarm, pointing out the obvious flaws in Evergrande's business model. But those warnings were largely ignored, dismissed as the naysaying of envious competitors or, even worse, enemies of progress. Shifting sands, the Chinese economy catches a cold. For years, the Chinese economy was an unstoppable engine of growth, but even the most robust economies need a breather. In the mid-2010s, the Chinese economy showed signs of fatigue. The government began tapping the brakes. Measures were introduced to cool the property market and curb risky investments. The party was over, but someone forgot to tell Evergrande. The shift in policy exposed cracks in Evergrande's foundation. Their sources of cheap credit began to dry up, and demand for their overpriced properties waned. Remember that game of musical chairs we talked about? Well, the music was about to stop, and Evergrande, with its mountain of debt and unfinished projects, was in no position to find a seat. Section 2, the debt trap springs shut. When the music stops, someone's left holding the bag. Evergrande built its empire on debt, borrowing billions to fuel expansion. They gambled on China's growth and rising property values, but they hit a losing streak. The economy slowed and the government tightened lending. Evergrande faced a liquidity crisis with billions in debt. Once invincible, they were now on the brink of collapse. Stock prices plummeted, investors panicked, and creditors circled. Evergrande's house of cards was about to collapse. Section 3, Ghost Cities and Empty Promises, the unraveling of the Evergrande dream. Remember those gleaming towers, those sprawling residential complexes that Evergrande had so proudly plastered across billboards and brochures? Well, it turned out that many of them were nothing more than empty shells, monuments to the company's hubris and reckless overbuilding. Across China, ghost cities emerged, vast developments with thousands of unfinished apartments, eerily empty and devoid of life. These were the physical manifestations of Evergrande's broken promises, a stark reminder that their grand vision of the Chinese dream was built on a foundation of sand. Buyers who had poured their life savings into these pre-sold apartments found themselves in limbo, left with nothing but worthless contracts and mounting debts. The social contract, the unspoken agreement between the Chinese government and its people that economic prosperity would be shared, was fraying at the edges. Section 4. Desperate measures, from fire sales to empty guarantees. As the walls closed in, Evergrande resorted to increasingly desperate measures to stay afloat. They slashed prices, offering fire sales that bordered on the absurd. They begged for government bailouts, promising to clean up their act and become a model corporate citizen. They even resorted to using their own employees' salaries to pay off debts, a move that reeked of desperation and smacked of unethical labor practices. But it was all too little, too late. The damage had been done. The trust that Evergrande had so carefully cultivated, the illusion of invincibility they had projected, had evaporated like a mirage in the desert. The Evergrande saga was a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even in a country accustomed to rapid economic growth and seemingly limitless possibilities, the laws of economics still apply. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. And in the case of Evergrande, the fall was going to be spectacular. Remember those glossy brochures, the ones Evergrande used to peddle their version of the Chinese dream? Turns out those pictures were about as accurate as a politician's promise. Behind the shimmering facades, a darker reality was setting in. Evergrande had skimped on quality. Reports of shoddy construction, leaky pipes, faulty wiring, and cracks in foundations. These issues were systemic and widespread. Evergrande prioritized speed and profit over safety. Imagine buying your dream home only to discover it's a giant Jenga tower. That was the reality for countless Evergrande homeowners. They poured their life savings into properties falling apart. And it wasn't just aesthetics. These practices posed serious safety risks. Now let's talk about tofu dreg projects, a term that sounds as appetizing as it is structurally sound. In China, it's a euphemism for buildings that are as structurally sound as a wet napkin, often built with substandard materials and questionable construction practices. And Evergrande, in their infinite wisdom, seem to have a particular fondness for these ticking time bombs disguised as residential towers. Think of it this way. Imagine building a skyscraper out of stale breadsticks and Elmer's glue. That's essentially what a tofu dreg project is, a disaster waiting to happen. These buildings are prone to cracks, leaks, and in extreme cases, complete structural failure. And it's not just a theoretical risk. China has witnessed its fair share of building collapses, often with tragic consequences. Evergrande's penchant for tofu dreg projects was a ticking time bomb. A disaster waiting to happen. They were sacrificing the safety and well-being of their customers for the sake of profit, a gamble that would have devastating consequences when the inevitable happened. While financial analysts dissected balance sheets, the real victims were ordinary Chinese citizens. Families who poured their life savings into Evergrande properties were left with debt and unfinished apartments. Imagine working your entire life only to have your dreams turn to dust. That was the reality for countless Evergrande homeowners. Section 4, a warning tremor, the Evergrande collapse and the future of China's economy. The Evergrande debacle wasn't just another corporate scandal, it was a warning tremor, exposing deeper systemic issues within the Chinese economy. It revealed the fragility of a growth model built on debt, speculation, and a dangerous nexus between business and politics. For years, China enjoyed an unprecedented economic boom, fueled by massive infrastructure projects and a burgeoning middle class. But this growth came at a cost, increasingly apparent with Evergrande's collapse. It served as a wake-up call, reminding that even the world's second-largest economy is not immune to the laws of gravity. The collapse exposed unchecked corporate greed, lax regulation, and a culture of opacity. The question now is, will China chart a more sustainable path or risk an even bigger fall? Section 1. The Icarus Paradox, Evergrande's flight too close to the sun. Remember Icarus, who flew too close to the sun? Evergrande, with its debt-fueled rise, missed that tale. They soared high on easy money, only to be caught by economic reality. Evergrande's rise and fall is a timeless story of hubris. Their relentless growth and debt pursuit was a disaster waiting to happen. Evergrande was too busy admiring their reflection to see the cliff. So what can we learn from the wreckage of Evergrande? What lessons can we glean from the rubble of this once mighty empire? Well, for starters, it's a stark reminder that no economy, no matter how powerful, is immune to the laws of gravity. China's economic miracle, for all its glitz and glamour, was built on a foundation of debt, speculation, and a healthy dose of smoke and mirrors. Evergrande's collapse exposed the cracks in this facade, revealing the systemic risks lurking beneath the surface. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked growth, the perils of crony capitalism, and the importance of, actually building things that don't fall apart in a stiff breeze. The Evergrande saga is a stark reminder that even in the 21st century, the fundamental rules of economics still apply. You can't borrow your way to prosperity, you can't build an economy on a foundation of empty promises, and you certainly can't defy gravity forever. The Evergrande crisis wasn't just a corporate collapse, it was a wake-up call for China. The government, faced with the prospect of social unrest and a full-blown financial meltdown, stepped in to try and contain the damage. But the question remains, can they fix the underlying problems that led to this mess in the first place? China's economic model, for all its successes, is facing a reckoning. The debt-fueled growth, the over-reliance on real estate, the cozy relationship between government and big business, these are all ticking time bombs waiting to explode. The Evergrande crisis was just a taste of what's to come if China doesn't change course. The Chinese government has shown a remarkable ability to adapt and evolve. But the challenges they face now are unprecedented. Can they navigate the fallout of Evergrande, reform their economy, and find a more sustainable path to prosperity? Or will they be remembered as the generation that flew too close to the sun? In our interconnected world, what happens in China doesn't stay in China. The Evergrande collapse sent shockwaves through global markets, a stark reminder that we're all in this together, whether we like it or not. Banks, investors, and businesses around the world felt the tremors, a testament to the interconnectedness of our globalized economy. Suddenly, those glossy brochures promoting Chinese real estate didn't seem so appealing. Investors who had poured billions into Evergrande and other Chinese companies were left licking their wounds, wondering if they had been sold a bill of goods. The Evergrande crisis served as a stark reminder that in our globalized world, risk knows no borders. A seemingly isolated incident in China can have ripple effects that are felt across continents, impacting everything from stock prices to interest rates to the price of your morning coffee. So, where do we go from here? Can China's economic miracle survive the Evergrande debacle? Can the dragon, bruised but not broken, learn to fly straight? Only time will tell. The Chinese government has shown a remarkable ability to adapt and evolve, but the challenges they face now are greater than ever before. The temptation will be to revert to old habits, to paper over the cracks and hope for the best. But the Evergrande crisis has shown that the path of least resistance is often the most dangerous. China needs to address the root causes of its economic imbalances, from its addiction to debt to its over-reliance on real estate. The future of China's economic miracle hangs in the balance. The choices they make now will have profound implications, not just for China, but for the entire world. Can the dragon learn to fly straight, or will it continue to soar too close to the sun, risking another even more devastating?